This
pace
conference
of
will now be
change,
recorded.
the pace of change is quickening, and the need for our ability to change is becoming more and more important. And if we have a decreased ability to change as the pace of change quickens, you can see that there's a problem there. And then you think of the fact that our industry, specifically 911, is very slow to change. You can see that we have a perfect storm. And what I found in my research is that the best communications centers across the country, they roll with change in a very different way. They are more proactive than the rest. They are able to get everybody involved and get everyone on the right in the right seats on the bus, going in the right direction. And what I want to share with you today in this 25 minutes or so are the three things that they do really, really well. The very best communication centers, what they do really, really well to make the most of rapid change. How's that sound? Sound okay? Awesome. Hi, Michelle. Nice to have you here. And I see Michelle and Emily's faces, so that's awesome to see some faces. Over the course of the conversation that we're going to be having over the next 30 minutes or so, I am going to encourage you to throw some stuff in the chat window. I will ask some questions. And that is not merely a rhetorical question, it's an invitation to join in on the conversation. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Adam Tim, as you can see on the screen there. And before I became the head of change management at Rapid Deploy, I first was a dispatcher for a little over 10 years with the LAPD. I was one of 700 line level dispatchers. We process 3 million calls for service each year. That looks like about 7,000 calls per day. So super high volume, lots of challenges working at a large center like that. After I left the LAPD, I started my training and consulting company called The Healthy Dispatcher. And with The Healthy Dispatcher, I just crisscrossed the country doing training classes on communication, leadership, stress resilience, and I've written a couple of books on the topics of stress resilience and leadership for the Communications Center. And I've really gotten a chance to, first of all, get curious and ask some big questions about how we can change more effectively, how we can be, and this is almost cliche, it's been used so often, but how can you be the change that your center wants to see? How can you be the change or a part of the change that our industry most needs? And I'd like you to keep that question in mind as we go through the content today, because I really want you to be able to take something out of this session and apply it to your life in the communications center or to wherever in the industry you work. If you don't work in the communications center, then you may be in some administrative role, but you're related to the industry, and anyone who is attached to the 911 industry is part of the success of the industry. So I'm going to throw up my presentation here, and we can go through it right here. Let's get going. You think about the challenges that we face as an industry. You think about the challenges that we face as an industry, and there are many. Not to mention protests and the pandemic and the political climate, but the problems that have always been there: staffing, low morale, and everything that comes along with it. And it can be tempting to simply say, that's just the way it is. It's not a lot that we can do. I have found that the centers that really change say, okay, we see how it is, but the status quo doesn't work for us anymore. We need to make some changes. And they just get to work. They get busy trying whatever they can, wherever they are. And if you find yourself, if your particular center is stuck in this cycle of dissatisfaction, circling the drain, and you have been for a number of years, there's an opportunity. What you're looking at here, the cycle of dissatisfaction, pulls together a couple of data points that we learned from the APCO Project Retains Effective Practices Guide. If you're not familiar with this document, it's a fantastic document. It's a wealth of knowledge for how you might be able to address the staffing and retention challenge that your center faces. And what the committee found was that your center's staffing situation, whether it's fully staffed or not, is related to how much overtime your people have to work, which is related to the level of satisfaction that your people have with the way things are, the status quo, which, if they're very dissatisfied, will cause them to leave, which negatively impacts the staffing situation and causes more overtime. And you can see that we might get stuck on this hamster wheel. And the biggest challenge, so if you say, okay, great, yeah, that's all fine and dandy. Yeah, I'm right there. We are on the hamster wheel, absolutely. And we have ever since I started here 20 years ago. Why is it so difficult to jump off the hamster wheel? Well, here's a part of the reason. We all can say, especially when we're attending a breakout session at a conference or a virtual conference session just like this, it's easy to say in this environment, yeah, let's change things. Positive change is necessary. It is required. We need things to change. And the follow-up question is, okay, great. So go change. Go do something different. And that's where it's really, really hard, especially when we're dealing with the work that we do, public safety, with type A overachieving perfectionists, especially when you have a lack of accountability, when you have a lack of understanding of who needs to do what. How many of your centers, and this is a rhetorical question, unless you want to raise your hand, how many of your centers have this kind of us versus them mentality where people say, you know, I would change something, I would offer some suggestions, but it's not going to make a difference. They're not going to do anything with that information anyway. It's not my job. That's above my pay grade. You know, I just work here. You know, I get paid the same whether I have a positive attitude or whether I am negative Nelly, the same old way I've always been. So what's the point? And some of this is a personal exploration. If you're not familiar with my story, for the first 7 years of my 10-year career at the LAPD Dispatch Center, I was not a very nice person. I would take out my anger and frustration on callers and coworkers and supervisors, and I blamed it all on them. I was the master finger pointer. And it wasn't until the 7-year mark when things got really, really bad, personally for me, both on the job and outside of the job, that I had to take pause and go, you know, number one, if I am going to keep my job, and this was after my third sustained citizen complaint, I had to say to myself, if I'm going to keep my job, my good paying city job here with the LAPD, I need to change. Second of all, I had to say, you know, if I'm going to start sleeping better, because I was waking up with indigestion and I had tension headaches and migraines, all of the attendant effects of chronic stress. I said, if I'm going to live happily, I'm going to have to change some things. And when I took that sobering look at how things were turning out for me, I was given clear evidence that my way wasn't working. Now, that's a personal context. You have likely been given evidence, and possibly lots of evidence, of whether or not your personal way currently works. Or if you're thinking about this conversation from the organizational perspective, your center has been given ample evidence whether your way currently works, your ways of staffing, whatever models you choose, your ways of scheduling, whatever method that you use, your ways of feedback, your ways of quality assurance, your ways of articulating the organizational goals in effectively. These are all areas that are ripe for adjustment if you have found that your way doesn't currently work. And if you're curious about how you can evaluate whether or not your way works, you might consider your quality assurance scores. You might consider your call service levels. You might consider your dispatch times against the national standards. You might consider your agency's sick time use. You might consider your annual turnover rate. You might consider the other artifacts of your culture, your organization's culture, that are either leading you to success or distracting or detracting from your agency's success. And I'm using that term success in kind of a large way because you get to determine what success looks like. The standards that NENA and APCO have put out, the NFPA, if you do EMD and fire and EMS dispatch, the NFPA standard is really great. These standards exist to kind of give us a baseline of key performance indicators and best practices that, if you don't know where to start, is a good place to start for your definition of success. Now, if you determine that you aren't very successful in that big term, or the biggest perspective of that term, we're far away from success, then you're kind of looking at your current reality and you're saying, okay, here's where we are. We're not very successful. I can see, however, that there is room for improvement. I can see the goal. Now, once you start to get really clear on what your goal is, or your objectives for success, or how you'll determine that, that's just the beginning. In fact, that's the easy part. I mean, you have to start somewhere, but that's the easy part. Because the thing that separates your current reality from where you want to be, from your goal, is not just the gap. It is not just the winding, twisting path represented here by this slide. It's a behavior gap. Here's why all of this is so difficult, why it's so difficult to change, even when the pace of change is quickening, even when it's very, very clear that we need to be better at rolling with change. It's difficult because in order to change effectively, you have to address the mindsets and the behaviors that are holding you in a stuck place. And if you know anything about those of us who work in this profession, we're very stuck in our ways. Our mindsets and our behaviors are almost hard written. So there is a way, though. There's a way to make change happen more effectively. And the first way, the first step. So there's 3 specific steps that I want to outline in the next few minutes that we have together here. The first step calls to what John Maxwell, if you've read any of John Maxwell's books, they're all fantastic. John Maxwell calls the indispensable quality of leadership. What do you think he said is the indispensable quality of leadership? Starts with a V. Any thoughts? Any ideas? I have ESP, so I know that you're thinking it is vision. Absolutely, it's vision. You have to start with a carefully crafted vision. What is your vision of success? I've been leading you to answer this question for yourself up until this point already. So the best centers start with a vision. And the leaders at these better centers start with a vision. And they get really, really clear on what the objectives are that can lead us to that vision. One director at a center in Michigan, when he came into the center, he was hired to oversee a major change initiative. And things were really, really bad at this center. They had 23 budgeted positions. They had 14 people working minimum staffing for years. And he came in, and what the first thing that he did, the new director, he sat down with all the employees and he gave them a very clear understanding of what his vision was for where the center needed to be. and he heard them out, and he engaged them in conversation. And what he said next was really powerful. He said, here's my vision. I'm really clear about where we need to get, but I don't know how we're going to do it. I know we can do it though. I know we can do it together. So the best leaders start with this vision. They're really, really clear about it. And then they organize the rest of the resources at the organization's disposal around achieving that vision. So if you can get more clear about what your vision for success looks like in real terms that matter to your people, you are already heads and shoulders beyond many of the other centers in this country. There's, I don't know, around 6,000 or a little bit more PSAPs in this country. The vast majority of them don't have much of a vision aside from take the next call. And if you've ever worked under the headset and you're slogging through call after call after call after call for a 12-hour or 16-hour shift, taking the next call isn't a very inspiring vision. If instead we have a vision for accreditation, that's why these industry standards are really great. If you're trying to become an accredited center, it gives the entire team something to rally around. So what is your vision for success? Get clear on that. As you become clear about your vision for success, you can better flesh out your organization's mission and purpose and values. If you haven't done this work, please do this work and enlist as many people as possible in the creation of your values statement, of your mission statement, of your purpose statement. These high-minded things, we have to begin big picture and idealistic. And you can even say, for example, the organization's vision is to provide the best service as possible to save as many lives as we can. That's a humanizing vision that people can rally around. So that's step one. Have a vision, tap into a vision, and set clear objectives and goals around the achievement of that vision. Now, the next step is to communicate that vision. And we all know that for being in communications, we aren't very good at communicating with each other. Why? Why do you think that is? Because we aren't trained to do that. We're trained to get information. We're trained to tell people where to go. We are trained to be hard-headed and perfectionistic. Don't you think that your success in the role as a dispatcher/call taker may infringe on your ability to clearly communicate in a way that resonates with other people? It must necessarily. So I'm asking you to rate yourself, rate your ways of communication. How are you as a communicator? Give yourself generally a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And if you don't know, that's information. And if the one thing that you do after this session is you start to engage people, especially if you're in a supervisory role or a leadership role, a formal leadership role at your center, ask people what they think about the way you communicate. Ask if they get what they need out of their interactions with you. So you have to have this vision. You have to clearly communicate the vision. You have to set goals and expectations around that vision. And if the one thing that you do differently is you become more clear about how what you say is possibly drowned out completely by how you say it, my friends out there with a little case of RBF. If you don't know what RBF is, ask a friend. That in itself, bringing more alignment between what you say and how you say it, can help. Another thing that can help a tremendous amount is being more empathetic, taking a more empathetic approach. And you might say, oh my gosh, I got off the dispatch floor. I'm promoted to be a supervisor, so I didn't have to be an empathetic caregiver to all those callers calling in. you probably found that if you are a supervisor, there's even a greater need for empathy. And many, many studies have found that an empathetic approach is way more powerful than a punitive or punishing approach. What are the best ways to communicate your feedback, your expectations, your goals? Is your quality assurance program. And if you don't have a quality assurance program, you absolutely must. How can people know how they are doing if you don't tell them? Just having more frequent one-on-one meetings can help change things and help and empower your people to roll more effectively with change. Now, if you're faced with an organizational change initiative that has been slow to get going, but you see the old ways kind of dying, you have to push through this neutral zone. So any transition, any change initiative almost always fails in this neutral zone where the old ways are going away, but the new ways haven't yet taken root. How do you push through that neutral zone? Communicate, 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 communicate effectively, and continuing to take action. So the first step is to have a vision. Second step is to begin to communicate that vision. The third step is to take action and begin to hold people accountable for the expectations, for the goals, and following up. And in time, and I've seen amazing things happen at centers all across the country in time by holding people to the commitments that we have all agreed upon, the amazing is realized. There's centers who have gone from 40% turnover to 0% turnover. There are centers that have gone from losing 60% of their trainees in every group to graduating 95% of the training group and holding on to them. There are centers that have gone from horrible places to work to centers where everyone wants to work, centers where they're always hiring and they never get any applications, to once they've changed things around, they open for applicants and get 200 applications. How? Because they get really, really clear on why they need to change, and they are getting that information from the rest of the team. So how can you bring the team together to move in the direction that we all need to go? And finally, how are you going to measure your success? How will you measure success along the way? What questions do you have about anything that we covered in this super laser session? I know it was fast pace, and we covered a ton. We covered a ton of ground. What questions do you have? Any questions? Any thoughts? How do let's see. I'm going to stop
Adam,
sharing
it
my.
was wonderful, and you're so good at fast paced, which is good because folks are eating lunch and going through it. That's probably why they're not asking questions. Their mouths are full, it's their lunch hour. Yeah.
No, hey, I'm talking to a room of dispatchers who can eat and broadcast and talk and type all at the same time. So,
That's right.
What does anyone have any questions, any thoughts about anything that we covered? What are you going to do next? I would like you to put something, if you've been paying attention, I would like you to throw something in the chat window. What is one specific action? What is one specific step that you can take after today? So there's a bunch of sessions. I saw the agenda. What are you taking out of not just this session, but the sessions that you're experiencing, and what can you do something with? That's the question that I leave you with as you rush off to your next session. Mo, back to you.
Okay, super. Thanks, Adam. All the recordings for these sessions, just to answer some of the questions coming in on the help desk, are going to be stored in the Knowledge Center. You have some sessions with the Knowledge Center starting at 1 this afternoon with Connie Beavers, and then also later this afternoon for supervisors, also with Connie. So for people that are looking for recordings, reach out to Lori Alexander with the Kansas 911 Council. And we're gonna shut this meeting down. Thank you, Adam. It was awesome. And we're gonna head over to the dispatcher track or the supervisor director track. So this year, just remember there are 2 tracks. They both start at the top of the hour. We have 2 different facilitators going, and you guys are pre-registered to both, so you can go back and forth between sessions if you wish. Please reach out to programdesk@motivations.com if you have any questions about attendance. Thanks and have a great rest of your day. See you again soon.